One is, I've pretty much been in bed for most of the last month with pneumonia. And so, I've been really sick. So I don't know where my energy level is, I don't know where my stomach is, I don't know where my coughing is, I don't know where anything. This is like my first field trip out into the world, really, since the playoffs started. So whenever the Seahawks started the playoffs, that was the last time I remember feeling okay, was that Saturday night game. Second thing is what I'm going to talk about today is, it's fun and it's purely anecdotal. It's just based on my observations about the types of people that have stuff and how to think about them, how to figure out why you have stuff, and maybe just some simple tools for explaining to other people why you have the stuff. And this came from, you know, one thing that always bothered me was when people said that my grandpa hoarded cars. And, well, that's a really different thing than saving or collecting cars. And so I started to get kind of picky about the technical differences between hoarding, collecting, and saving. Because I think there are three unique categories in the world of having lots of stuff, of anything. So on we go.
Harold did all three.
Having stuff is a dirty job. I mean, that's one of the things you have to realize is as you accumulate stuff, I mean, I'm saying stuff just generically. It can be clothes, it can be cars, it can be hats. It doesn't matter. But you really you have some responsibilities, you have to take care of it. It is something that you have to get your fingers dirty in order to either enjoy or share or have. And of course, somebody's got to do it. That's me and Grandpa and my sister Jill. That was on the set of the Jacqueline Kennedy movie way back when. And we'll talk about where Harold fit into all of this and what type of person he was, because that's kind of interesting as an overlay to everything. The hoarder. I'll read the caption. It says, now that you're 10, we can tell you the truth. Beauty isn't actually in the eye of the beholder. There are international standards, and you haven't met them.
Yes.
Are you a hoarder? You keep everything just because you can. That's a problem. In that you can't touch it and let it go, and so you end up just keeping it. You're non-discerning. You don't care what the item is. It can be something you know nothing about. It can be a widget, but you know you've got it and you need to keep it someplace. So you don't have a filter there at all about the difference between a useful frying pan and one that's so all rusted out and ridiculous and got holes in the bottom of it that nobody's interested. I mean, it's all equal. There's still just frying pan. And you gotta have the frying pans. That type of thing. Other people don't understand it. This is a key thing of when you cross into hoarder territory, I think, is where if people are questioning you constantly about why you have this stuff, you should probably listen to those people at some point. Because it's obvious there's something in bells and whistles that are going off at that point. So if other people don't understand it and you can't explain it, it may be a different problem. And you can't explain it is the last one I put up there. And that you don't have a good reason for why you have that skillet with the rusted holes in the bottom. If you can't explain it to somebody, then you're a hoarder. Or you're potentially a hoarder. You keep everything just because you can. You have the means to keep it, or you think you do. Meaning that everything's got a place, and you think you've got it figured out to where that place is. What you're not realizing is you're ending up with a little walking pathway through your living room, and stuff's piling up on the sides, but you think you've got a place for everything that's there. You have the means meaning it's not hurting you financially or doesn't feel like it is. And it could be because you don't care about money. It could be making you go absolutely broke. But if you don't care about money and you're just disconnected from all of that, you think you have the means. And I think the third one's key. No one is nagging you to get rid of anything, or have they just given up? One of the things, if you look at when people become hoarders, the real problem is they tend to be alone, and they tend to not have people that are telling them that they might be having a problem with this stuff. And so they either give up on nagging that person, or the person gives up on wanting to hear any outside input about having all of this stuff. And so that's just something to look out for, is that if no one's nagging you, that's almost the opposite reason to be a little concerned. If somebody's not questioning, that means nobody cares at that point, and that's something you got to look out for. I know none of you are hoarders, so I'm kind of going through this one quickly. The things you have fit no pattern. You're non-discerning. Again, it runs the gamut. It's an oleo of stuff. And it's a point of, I touched it, I keep it, it's mine. You don't care if it has a particular meaning. You don't have any idea if it fills a particular need. It's a thing, and you've got it, and you're going to keep it. And that's how hoarding happens, is that you just end up keeping stuff. And then finally, the other people don't understand it. You might just be treated like an eccentric. Like, you know, well, he's got that house that's got all the cats and everything. Yeah, your cats enjoy the fun hiding places. I mean, I think that's a sign too. If people just think that that's a problem, but it's his problem or her problem, then that's a sign also. Oh, you always have to buy something at every garage or yard sale you pass. I had a grandma, my grandma Shando. She was really on the edge of being a hoarder. But the thing that was always fun with her, she could not drive by a yard sale, garage sale without buying something. And that something would end up just with all the other somethings in this big giant house. And I mean, the house was just cram-packed with stuff. But whether it was for a nickel or $5, there was something at a garage sale that was somebody else's. And that's kind of like the old, when I was a kid, I actually thought about it in terms of that there was something to her, like she was getting a piece of somebody else's stuff, and she was taking it and keeping it for them with her stuff. But I don't think it was that complicated. I just think she liked garage sales, but anyway. If you touch it, your first inclination is to keep it. Now, we've all had that feeling sometimes, where you pick something up at a swap meet or a garage sale or someplace, and you think, this is really neat. And either it's too expensive, or you don't know where you're going to put it, or, you know, it's just, but you've touched it. Hoarders have a compulsion to not be able to put it down at that point. They are going to take it home. And there's not the reasoning in there of, that you would probably have, does it fit into my budget, do I have room for it? All those things that semi-normal people would ask just doesn't happen. So I think that's it for hoarding. Oh, not yet. Oh, you can't even explain it. I talked about that already a little. Attachment to things, your cats are even worried. But you keep on keeping. And that's the way I just would describe the hoarder. That's what you end up seeing on TV generally. I mean, I'm not breaking any real new ground here, but because if this is you, you're probably beyond hope. That's a brain scan. That's my brain, actually. But I mean, you know, frankly, for the hoarder category, if that's what you really think you are, and that's what you want to be, none of this is going to be helpful to you probably, because that's a whole kind of different beast from the saving and collecting, which we're going to talk about now. Collecting. I use this collection as the introduction for this because it's one of my collections. When I was a kid, when I was in the 6th grade, we lived for 4 months on Mott Street in Lower East Side, Manhattan. And Mott Street is right there. And there's Houston, and there's Broadway, I think. Broadway's coming down there. And then it's Mulberry Street, so it's Mott and Mulberry Street. And when I was a kid, the Dr. Seuss book that I was really popular was I Saw It on Mulberry Street. And God bless my parents in 1980 New York City when we had Son of Sam running around killing people and it was the murder capital of the world. 10-year-old Eric just got the complete run of the Lower East Side of Manhattan for a summer. I mean, I would take off in the morning and see what I'd see on Mulberry Street. And one of the things I started understanding was the artists that were in the lofts up above the Italian shops. This was Little Italy. It's more Chinatown now, but then it was very Little Italy. It was very mob run, very Little Italy. But they were very supportive of the artists living in the lofts, the artist lofts up above in their print shops and stuff. And I was this cute 10-year-old kid. I could talk my way into just about anything. I mean, got to meet Andy Warhol. It was like, you know, I mean, there's a bunch of artists that I just kind of started hanging out with around Mulberry and Mott Street in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And one of the things that came out of that for me was an appreciation for Lower East Side Jewish religious art. Boy, I'm not Jewish, I'm not religious, but what I realized is that it was really neat because they were playing with stuff since the 60s, and it was kind of the entryway at first for how you get into art is to do it for your synagogue, and then eventually you get good and you end up in one of these artist communities in the Lower East Side, and then you start to get really fancy. And so that's the introduction to collecting, and that's the most important part of the collecting thing. Collecting has a purpose. It's easily stated. You know what the purpose is. So it may sound crazy that I say at like this is how specific I can get. I like 1968 to 1980 Jewish American Lower East Side Manhattan influenced art. It is what it is. I really like it, and that's what I've done. So that's just as an introduction, though. Start thinking about that collecting has a purpose. That's going to be important as we go through this. And that's why I talk about there's a method to your madness. You think about things in sets and order, meaning it makes sense. It's easily explained. So if I go back, like I know this is my oldest piece in this, and this is from 1963 in Greenwich Village. I know which art studio it came from, I know who the artist is. I also know one of his students was this guy, who became very famous in the 70s and ended up dying of AIDS, and it's a whole, he did like a final set, and that's something from the final series, but also influenced this guy in Alaska, believe it or not. I got that in Juneau, Alaska. And they're all tied into a tree. In that they not only knew each other, they influenced each other. It all came out of that 16 square blocks in the Lower East Side. And you can see, if you just look at it as a group, you can see how it's got a lot of the same kind of motif to it. You're methodical about it. Collecting takes time. Most people that are collecting don't just go out and buy a collection and say, there, I collected, by buying somebody else's collection. You get enjoyment out of being methodical about thinking about it over a long term. And that's because you plan for it. When you're not buying something or adding it to a collection, you're planning on what you could add to the collection. And that for some people, they may never be able to own the piece that they really want, but the planning to own the piece that they really want can be as much of an enjoyment as actually owning the piece they really want. And you know, we see that if you go to car auctions and you see a car that's, you know, $20 million car. Well, you're not going to be able to afford a $20 million car. But it is fun looking at the $20 million car and knowing about its history, its racing history, or its design history, or whatever, and understanding that. Because the final thing is the most important. You get pleasure out of it. You know, whether it's me hanging up the art in my house, or I also collect books, whether it's taking books down and reading books, it's just, or it's a car and you drive it. It's pleasurable. And that's the difference between hoarding and saving. That's a collector mentality. It makes you feel good that you have it. It's usable in that way. First, you can sell things. The tagline there is, "I'll need your leg as well," as he's handing his arm to him. You can sell things. There's a bigger goal to achieve. That's a big thing with collecting, is that you're not so attached to it that you don't understand that there's a bigger picture that that item may be able to help you achieve in your collecting. You're not emotionally attached to most particular items. Now, I put most particular items because I don't care who you are. There's some stuff that you just are emotionally attached to. It's sentimental, it's something special you found, you've got a great story about it. That's great, that's fine. But most of what you've got is for your enjoyment, your amusement, and it's filling some bigger goal. But you also know that it can be traded up for, or it can be traded in on, or it can be traded, just straight up traded. And you're acutely aware of the value of your stuff. Nobody ever wants to admit this, but most collectors really do know what they have is worth. It doesn't mean that they'll write it down, it doesn't mean they'll tell you. But the example I use for that is when you go to, if you watch the show, Antiques Roadshow, not Antiques Roadshow, what's the one, American Pickers. American Pickers. Isn't it funny how they roll up on somebody and says, "I had no idea these guys were coming along." And the pickers start walking through, and these people know on a dime the retail value of stuff they haven't looked at in 50 years. They know it straight up. And that's one of the things that I've kind of picked up on, that's how you tell the difference between a hoarder and a saver. That's a collector. That is somebody who thought about that thing. Doesn't mean that they've touched it in 50 years, doesn't mean that they're using it every day, but they know where it is and they know the current market value of it. And so they throw out the retail value, and then the guys go, "Oh, you know, I can't pay that for it because that's just what it's worth." I mean, think about, if you watch that show, how many times you hear that, that back and forth. And that's because people know the value of their stuff. You become an expert, particularly in some things. It can be eras, you know, so it could just be a time frame that you're good at. Style, makes, models, sets, people. You're a nerd about it. There's something that you end up knowing more about a particular something that you collect than 99.9% of the other people out there. And that gives you pleasure. And it may be that it never comes up. And maybe it's just the pleasure is in your head. It's just the principle that you know more about a particular thing. The collection I put there, this is a set of history books. There's 112 of them. And they were printed by, like Harper's back in between 1871 and 1886. And there were 4 of them that came out a year, basically. So it was 25 years they went. So there's 111. I don't quite, I do know all of this and how it adds up and why it adds up as it does, because they did them once a month to begin with, and then they started doing it as quarterly. But you'd subscribe to this, and you'd get these history books of all these different countries. And I bought those from my grandma Chandra about 20 years ago. And I was missing 6 of the books. And so that collection has become about me not only knowing the 6, I need one of the series of 2-part, I need the middle part of 3 parts of Iraq. I mean, I can name off what I need. And I haven't found any of them. I've never seen another one. I've looked in every single bookstore, used bin, but the pleasure for me is knowing that I've got this on my shelf, I can read them. I've read a lot of these. It's really interesting reading world history from the 1800s. Whole different perspective, by the way. It's really fun. I like old almanacs, the same thing. But I've gotten pleasure just out of the fact that someday, at some used bookstore, I'm going to stumble, or on eBay or someplace, I'm going to stumble on one of the 6 I need. I've seen most of the others. But the ones I need, it looks like they're the ones nobody wants, so they quit their subscription for a year. I mean, if you look back at the whole thing, it's just like, I don't need the Middle East. And so I'm weak on my Middle East stuff on that. But the point being that when you're collecting, that is the way you start thinking about stuff. And collecting does have a pleasure principle to it. Meaning that there's an enjoyment there that doesn't mean you have to have it put up in neon lights to tell everybody that that's the enjoyment you're getting. But there is an enjoyment. And there's the fun of becoming an expert in something. A quote-unquote expert. Some people, think they're experts and maybe they don't know as much as they think they know. We've all met those people, but that's okay, because it's their thing. Oh, that's another thing that's important with collecting and saving, is people that do it tend to be very non-judgmental about the other people that are doing it. That's like an in general principle that I've learned. Remember that, Doug? Saving. Doug gave me this bedpan as part of our Christmas exchange about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. It's great. It's in the box, never been used.
No, you stole it from somebody else.
Yeah, I took it. It was one of those Christmas party exchanges type things. I have no idea what I'm ever going to do with a bedpan.
If you're getting up in here.
Yeah, I know. See, it could come in handy. And we'll talk about that point exactly. But the thing is for 10 or 12 years since I got that bedpan has sat on a shelf in this exact same place, and I've not touched it. I've gotten no enjoyment out of it, other than the fact that I have a bedpan sitting on a shelf that's new in the box. So that brings us to savings. Saving. Saving is, in general, you keep things because they, and here's key word, might be useful. You have no idea when, you have no idea where, and you're pretty vague about why. Hence, the bedpan sticks around. I have no idea when, I have no idea what. I know what a bedpan is used for, and I know I am getting older. And other people around here, I don't know. So I keep the bedpan around. I've saved it. And it sits and is saved. And that's the easiest way to think about what a saver is versus a collector. There's no immediate pleasure principle to it. It's looking ahead to what that thing could be used for under the right circumstances, and therefore I'm going to be the one that keeps it. And I put that cartoon up there because it's kind of like the person, my dad, and this is a great example, my dad at the beach cabin has this great telescope. And I mean, it's this really nice, beautiful telescope that he doesn't know how to use. So one day I was asking about, why do you have this really great telescope that nobody uses? And he says, oh, for when a comet comes by. Huh? And he said, well, when Halley's Comet came in 1996, I didn't have anything to be able to look at it closely, so I forget if it was Halley's or it might have been one of the other ones, but he said I didn't have anything to properly look at it, so I went and got something so I can look at it. So I said, do you think you need to be prepared by knowing how to use it? He said, no, they usually give you a good time warning when a comet's coming by. You know, and there's no arguing with the fact that he thinks he's going to need, I mean, that is a form of just saving it, having it because it has that vague idea of why you're doing it. I mean, this is a little particular in talking about comets, but that's the idea, that no reason to make it go away. Because you don't need to know when and where and why a comet's coming by, but it's good to know that you've got a telescope in case you need it. And bird watchers are like that too, actually. That's why I put that up there. You have a sense that you're stopping a slow leak. This is a savings thing too. And that is kind of a martyrdom. It's a catcher in the rye. It's Hoarding Caulfield. That you're grabbing stuff because somebody needs to keep it. That you're the one that understands its place in the world. Except you don't really know what its place is. You just know it's got a place, and darn it, you're the guy that's going to save it. I mean, I think we probably have all read Catcher in the Rye, are familiar with it, but that's Hoarding Caulfield's problem is that, you know, he pictures kids running through a field, and he's trying to grab them before they go off a cliff. And he's the only one there that can get the kids before they break out of this wheat field and fall off a cliff. And so that's the kind of a martyrdom type syndrome he develops about stuff, about other people. And I think that that's kind of what happens with saving with stuff. You're its protector. You do have a feeling that nobody else quite gets it as well as you do. Now again, you don't exactly know what the it is, but you know. And the third one that I put up there, it's not necessary to be part of it, but it's usually the case, is that you relate to it in some way. Whether it's because it's something from your childhood, or it's something you had in a car you had once, or it's something that was in a neighbor's house, or whatever it is. There's usually, for savers, there's some place that they're relating to it, and understanding its bigger, how it's a cog in a whole bigger picture. Can they easily explain what the bigger picture is? No. But they do understand a cog when they see a cog. And savers tend to end up with an emotional attachment. You care about being that person. I mean, that's your role as a saver. And sometimes it may be out of ego or hubris, but you do care about it. And so, you know, part of my book collection, I have a world book. I have like 20-something sets of encyclopedias of different types. Because my dad sold encyclopedias when I was a kid. And I still think, and like this set is actually the one we had when I was a kid. But there's a set of Britannicas that's on the other side. I should have taken a picture of that. But there's some Britannicas that the local library was just throwing away. I mean, they had no use for them. They had no way to sell them. It was more expensive to try to sell them. I mean, this is what was explained to me. So I just took them out of the garbage and came home with a completely good set. Oh, they're People's. That's what they were. They're 1898 People's encyclopedias. And they were just getting thrown out because there was no need for them. And I saved them. Now, would I normally go dumpster diving for stuff? No. But because I have a general emotional connection from my childhood to encyclopedias, and I do think they're important, I do think they're useful at certain times, they're faster than the internet for some things. And they're easier than the internet, and they're more reliable than the internet. This is what I've been trying to teach my daughter. She uses them actually, she's 14 now, and she uses my almanacs and encyclopedias quite a bit. Because it usually is easier than looking at Wikipedia, and it's more reliable, and it's all those things I just mentioned. But you treat everything as well as you can if you're a saver. Meaning, you're going to lose some things during the course of being a saver. But your goal is to always save it in a way that when it becomes useful, it'll be there to be useful. That's always your goal. And you may not have the means or the methods to be able to do that 100% perfectly, But the fact is if you hadn't done what you did in saving that thing would be long erased from the earth to begin with. And you know that. And that's part of what's motivating you in this whole process. And you know exactly, notice how I made that big in capital, you know exactly what you own in case someone else needs it, you need it, or it's for your own pleasure. Savers and collectors are alike like that, but savers know that they're just kind of an in-between usually. You kind of fall into the saving category. If you know you're just kind of a vessel for a while and this thing's journey to whatever it is to get used for whatever it needs to be used for. And that's the way I feel about my encyclopedias. At some point, some library, some place, or some school, or somebody's going to want an 1898 set of people's encyclopedias. I know it. I'm just convinced of it, because it's cool. It's got all these great medicine things, and it's fun. And I'm sure of it. Now, has that school or library or anything come along recently? No. But I know that it's there. And so the first time I catch wind that somebody can make use of it, it's off. I'm done being its vessel. It goes off to have somebody else take care of it. Now the fun part. What to do. I have to tell a little story about that coin too. I have a little coin collection. It's not much. That's from the 1893 Columbus exhibition in Chicago, the World's Fair, basically. And I got that in 1976. And it was funny because I didn't have enough money to buy coins at a coin show. I went up to the Seattle Center, and it was a coin show, and I wanted to collect coins. I remember in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, there was big runs on silver. Silver was overvalued. The Hunt brothers hadn't quite started cornering the market, but were kind of on the tip of where coins are. It's before baseball cards and comic books. Coins are kind of in the late 70s being the thing to collect. So all of a sudden, Indian head pennies are like $3, and they were 2 cents 2 years before, and they're $3 now. And I was like 7 years old, 7 or 8 years old. We go up to this coin show, and I couldn't afford any of the coin. I didn't have enough money to really buy anything that interested me. But this metal, it wasn't a coin, there wasn't a book value on it. This is part of the fun. We've all had these moments where the guy that had it didn't really know what it was worth because he couldn't look in a coin value guidebook. And so I gave him $10 for it. And I don't know what it's worth now, but the reason I wanted it was that it's high relief on a coin. It's a 50-cent piece. It's a commemorative 50-cent piece. But it's a high relief on a coin, and in 1893, that was like a really big deal to be able to strike a coin that detailed and that raised off the coin. Anyway, I digress. So what do? Now we get to some nuts and bolts that may or may not be helpful. Most people are some of all these things. Most of you, in what I've described in the 3 categories, you can probably see a little bit of you at any given time in any of the categories. Some of you are way more one than the other. Some of you are just a mix, a hybrid. But some people are perfectly happy or ill to be hoarders. You know, and this is where I go back. If you're hoarding, if you're just purely hoarding, you got a problem. I mean, that's a whole different thing. Some people can't afford to be collectors, and I put yet. Because some people are collectors without realizing they're collectors. Because maybe the rest of the world just hasn't caught up to what they're collecting yet. They may have more wealth than what they've collected than they think they do. And I think that's always interesting, that the market eventually, if you're a good collector, generally, the rest of the world will catch up with you, and you'll be surprised that you can afford to collect more than you realized you could. Some people don't have the space for savings, and they may not know it. That's the big thing, space. I mean, just saving stuff takes a lot of room. You know, you can look around at Marymount, you can look at my house, you can probably look at some of your houses. If you're just saving, if you're following the saving path, there's a point where there's just so much room to be a saver. So you really have to be aware of that part of it. The room is a big problem. It's kind of trite sounding, but write a mission statement. Even if it's just in your head. 1 to 3 very clear sentences for your goals regarding your stuff. Why do I want this stuff, this particular stuff? Share it with friends and family as needed. And this is where we get into the answering the question of, you'll get asked, why do you have 100 LP albums? Have a simple mission. You can just answer that and shrug your shoulders and just walk away, and it's going to make sense. I mean, that's really what that's for. Doesn't mean you go around blaring it out to everybody that that's what your mission is. But it is important to have it thought out well enough that you can answer that question of why do you have it. Stick to it. Prove yourself worthy personally and publicly. Now, I put that one in there because I think once you end up having a mission for a particular thing or particular types of things, the hardest thing is to kind of stick within that. We only have so much time, we only have so much money, we only have so much space. And so your goal at that point is to stay as well as you can within those parameters. That collection there, I decided when we moved into our house, I wanted to do psychedelic 60s album covers with Frank Sinatra 60s album covers. And I wanted them to line a hallway. And so I spent 2 years just going around looking for, they had to be produced between 1960 and 1969 basically. And it's not just psychedelic, but hard rock and roll mixed with Frank. Okay, that was a collecting thing. I had a specific goal, I knew how it fit in, I knew what I was going to do with it, and it was for my pleasure. Boom. So I ended up with my Frank Sinatra Grateful Dead wall. Have a clear plan that gets everyone on board. And this is kind of like part of the mission statement. Not everybody's always going to be on board, ever. But it does start to help both your family and your friends to understand the method to your madness. Is once you've got something you can clearly communicate about why you've got that stuff, or what the purpose of that thing is, it puts it into a context for them, and it becomes a lot harder to argue with you when you want to buy the next thing that everybody thinks you're crazy for buying or acquiring, or whatever. What should be in a plan? What do you want? I mean, that sounds so basic, but what is it that gives you the pleasure? What is it you enjoy? I mean, what do you want? What do you want that you don't have? What do you especially like that you already have? What do you want? Why is that important? And again, you don't just sit down and write all of this out in some big thesis paper or whatever. Just in your head, to be organizing it in a way. Why is it important? What's the purpose of owning it? You know, we talked about the difference between collecting and saving. You know, collecting is more for your pleasure, saving is more for utilitarian value at some point, generally. So what's the purpose? Where does it fit into your life? Can you afford it? That goes without saying, but that's one that, you know, an example for that for me, when I was in college, I was a freshman in college, I had just gotten my first American Express card. And I'd never made a charge on my American Express card. And I'm at a baseball card shop in downtown Boston, and there's these, I call them movie star cards, but they're cigar cards from the late 1930s of movie stars in all their latest roles. And there's like 50 of them, and they're mint condition. I mean, they look like they're brand new. I thought they were counterfeit at first, and I took them to another place. The guy's like, no, this is legit. They're absolutely perfect, 1936 and 1939. The guy wanted, there were 50 of them, he wanted $500 for them. And so for like 2 days, I hemmed and hawed, went back and forth. And I finally talked him down to selling them to me for $325. And I thought, wow, I'm getting a real bargain here, less than 10 bucks a pop. You know, I'll take them back to the West Coast, and you know, I'll take them to LA next time I go to Disneyland, and they're going to be big in LA, and really make some money off this. What I didn't realize was that American Express makes you pay your bill every month. And I couldn't afford $325 for these cards. I had gone completely over my head for the thrill of the hunt. I had gotten out of where, as a freshman in college, I had the ability to pay for this. And so I had to raise money among friends, so I sold shares in the cards. It's a funny story. But I ended up raising the money, I paid the bill, ended up paying everybody back by the end of the year, started working at the Globe, got all that taken care of. But the point being that if you are having an uh-oh moment about when you buy something, you probably shouldn't be buying it. And that's just really important. If your first thought is panic after you actually own it, that's not good, whether you're saving, hoarding, or collecting. Do you have space for it? We've talked a lot about that. The space is that, you know, having stuff is a dirty job. Part of the dirty job is keeping your stuff organized, knowing where it is, being hands-on with it, and having space for it, knowing its purpose. So you can have a thingamabobber that you saved, but if you don't know what that thingamabobber does, then it's not worth saving because you can't explain to somebody what to actually use it for. An example for me personally was I started saving gap point, the gauges for the gaps in your car. Because they came in all these different styles, and they're really neat. In Art Deco years, they come in all these different shapes, and they have all the different gauges. I've never checked the gaps in a car, but I do know that they're all gap checkers. I have a box of gap checkers. If you need to check gaps, I'm the guy to probably go to. I can find the gauge for it. But the idea is I know the purpose of them. Have I ever done it? Have I ever used it? Will I ever use it? No. But I know where all the gap checkers are. Most important one, I think the most important one, what happens after me? Where does the stuff go? I think that is fundamental to being responsible about your stuff. Is just either, you know, a will or just saying it to your spouse or to your children or to somebody, to have them understand the purpose, the basic purpose, to keep them on board so if something happens to you, they know they're not overwhelmed. Because the fact is, most people, even your closest loving family, is not as much into things like gap gauges as you are. I mean, it's just, you just can't expect that of other people to be as passionate about it or want to save it as badly as you did or collect it or what have you. And that's why I don't know how many of you have been watching, you know, we had the episode of Strange Inheritances that was about our family, but I've been watching the other episodes, and it's really fascinating. I think the other episodes are way more interesting than our episode, because these are people that really they do end up with they end up with stuff. And there's a clear divide between the families that when they end up with the stuff, have a basic, I want to say plan, but they have an idea of what's supposed to happen to the stuff. And those that say, what the hell am I going to do with this thing? And they don't know the first thing about it. And, you know, the classic one was the baseball cards. I think it's the third episode or second episode in the thing. Family inherits $8 million in baseball cards that they didn't know their aunt had in her attic. They knew nothing about baseball cards. They knew nothing about baseball. They knew nothing about the players. They knew nothing about the card market. They had no clue. So they ignored it for a couple of days because they didn't see any value in it. And all she had said was there was some good stuff in her attic, and they just had no idea. Well, imagine the process over the next year. They go through the number of lawyers and auctioneers and auction houses and estate people planning, because you can't flood the market with all of these perfect baseball cards. You got to do a little bit at a time. So suddenly they got trust funds. They went up to the attic thinking they were going to find really cool old dolls that their aunt had. And they end up with $8 to $12 million worth of baseball cards with no clue what to do with them. And so it probably would have been helpful if the aunt had at least given them a little bit of a heads up that she had been hoarding these from her father's cigar store back at the turn of the century, just for example. But that's just really important. Where does this stuff go? What happens to it? Oh, and this is the last slide, actually. And don't forget, everyone is going to have an opinion. And so, I mean, I put a couple of editorial cartoons that have been about LeMay stuff up there, but everybody's going to have an idea that they can do it better than you, that they've got a different way of doing it, that their thing is nicer, that it doesn't make any sense. I mean, everybody's just going to have an opinion. And you've got to be ready to just deal with that. And if you have all those other things in place, you have a fairly clear mission and you have a basic plan, it doesn't really matter what other people say from the chorus out there about it, because it's your thing. I made it. I didn't even cough once during it. Does anybody have any comments or questions or anything?
Eric, I've got a question. How you did, I'm not sure you talked about it a lot, but where did you see, I think I know, but your grandpa, Harold LeMay, where do you see him in the hoarding?
Oh, yeah. He always described himself as a saver. He saved stuff. And, which is exactly, I think, where on my scale, in my world, what I'm describing here is where he fits in. He's got some collector and some hoarder. There's quite a bit of collector. That's what I'm saying. There's like it's like one of those tests where you start to look and there's the big line and then there's a little bit that overlaps with this and then has a little bit of that. But I think his general DNA makeup of how all this stuff exists is as saving. He did the Hoarding Caulfield. He did it with cards. He did it with Americana things. He did it with lots of items. In that he had the room, he had the means, he had the friends to help him, and he got a great deal of pleasure out of it. And I think that there was a little bit of him thinking that if he didn't do it, who was going to do it? Now, is that completely true? No, but that's okay to think that way about what you're doing.
When we're on tour, and I ever heard the phrase that it's Harold's junkyard, I never let that hang out there. I always make sure they understand the value of preservation. And I just can't stand the thought of leaving something negative out there, hanging in a public opinion. Yeah,
and this goes back to, remember the saving stuff, the idea of you take care of it as well as you can. And that's where, whether it's preservation, sometimes it's restoration, sometimes some things are just worth waiting out in a field until somebody needs it. But it's saved, it's there, we know where it's at. And it might be covered in a tarp or it might be, but you do as well as you can with it for whatever its value is within a big picture. That's a lot of stuff was a junkyard. I mean, I remember being at 204th Street and thinking, you'd look and there'd be a line, there was a line of Corvairs. Remember the Corvairs stuff? How many Corvairs were there?
I don't know, 100.
Yeah, there were like 100 Corvairs. It was like the largest Corvair graveyard.
Well, you know where you got them. You got them from another wrecking yard.
That's what I was going to say. They came from a wrecking yard. And he put them at 204th Street. There was somebody there to buy, I think, every one of the Corvairs, wasn't there? I mean, they all got sold.
Scrapped.
Some of them got strapped.
Some of them did get strapped. Some of them deserved to get strapped. But the idea being that one man's junk line of 105 Corvairs, there were people there that really wanted the Corvairs for something. I mean, the one I always remember is there's a guy that bought it just for the taillights, I think it was. And there's something in the back taillights that is hard to find. I forget what the detail was, but he bought the whole car just so he could have that piece. And then they scrapped the rest of the car. But he stripped it all down, and that was that.
There's reputed to be 400 Corvairs at Connell, Washington, which has a prison. It's over on the 295. I've been there a couple times. People have a real hard time getting them out, but there've been some real treasures pulled out of there. The guy just started parking them in his field, and it's third generation now. Disappointing.
It happens. Is there anything else?
Anybody in the family ever, I know there's a generational problem, but what happened to Bill Harris' collection? Did Harold ever have a reaction to that, or was that influence anybody?
Yeah, he was acutely aware of what happened to Bill Harris' collection. I mean, there's no doubt that was one of the motivators to end up with the museums we have today. And the problem, Bill Harris is a great example of this. Bill Harris died without a plan, believe it or not. They were so much for his own enjoyment that he never shared with anybody what the purpose was of them or what happened to them. And long story short, the very simple problem he had was when he died, they suddenly realized he did not own a single one of his own automobiles. He'd been buying them through the casino. Or he'd been borrowing money from the casino to pay for cars in the casino. I mean, basically, the casino owned the cars. And so the family actually made an effort to get the cars out. And Holiday Inn, which ended up had bought Harris Casinos, said, oh, no, wait a minute. Yeah, you can buy any car you want, but we're just going to have a couple little auctions. By the time they sold off Harris' car collection, the bulk of it, it was worth, I think it was 4.5 times as much as the real estate and gaming operations that Holiday Inn had acquired in the whole transaction. The whole money for the deal for Holiday Inn was in liquidating those cars. And so they gave some money to help endow the Harris Museum, and they kept some cars that could be in the Harris Museum. But for the most part, that's the basic story of what happened. Bill Harris could have easily prevented that. If he had just, while he was alive, done a couple of simple things that would have taken a couple hours, it would never have even been an issue. He could afford to do it. He just didn't confront his stuff. And he didn't want to. And he talked to his personal secretary at the time, and she said he just figured he was going to live forever. Even though he'd had multiple heart attacks and he had been ill and there was all these bad things happening, he just thought he was going to get up every day and go to the office, and then if something did happen, well, that wasn't his problem. It was a very selfish way, actually, of just thinking about it, that, when I'm gone, it's not my problem anymore. So you talk to his kids, and it was a nightmare. Because they didn't know exactly they knew what he had, but they didn't know how to get it back. They didn't have the means to get it, so enough about that. But it was definitely the Harris thing, and Harris is a great example of a collector. If you look at Harris' car list, you can see the patterns. They set up like the ebb of a tide on the ocean shore, where he goes through the electrics, and he goes through the Duesenbergs, plucking out just the right ones. At the height of his collection, saying like 1975, 74, 75, it's so obvious as you look at the list what he was thinking in those 1,800 cars that he had. It made sense. It wasn't random. It was just really well thought out. That will never happen again, I don't think. But anyway, it is what it is.
His sharing is one thing that really impressed me when you stood on the ropes in the shop and could watch the work going on, and the guys would come over and answer the question. If you sort of
the whole Sparks facility was neat.
In your very first slide, if you go back to it, you had think it was Brussels sprouts
Oh,
or something. And I was wondering just what motivated that particular choice.
Well, I'll tell you,
Do you have a collection of Brussels sprouts?
Had a picture.
There we go, yeah.
what? The general thing that motivated me on all this is I took all of these photos, so I didn't have to worry about getting permission, I didn't have to worry about anything else. I just pulled them off one folder that I keep that I just call stock photos. So when I take pictures of stuff and I think, yeah, that might be useful someday, I throw it in my stock folder. It's on my desktop. So, and one day I took a picture of this big bowl of Brussels sprouts that my wife had cooked. And I remember thinking most people don't like Brussels sprouts. I can tell you the motivation of using the Brussels sprouts. Most people don't like Brussels sprouts in general. They're not their favorite thing. And secondly, most people don't eat 3 pounds of them at a time for 3 people. Like, it's just like, there were so many dang Brussels sprouts that it was kind of ridiculous. It's this big, giant bowl of Brussels sprouts. And to me, that's kind of like we were hoarding Brussels sprouts. Like, it was just too much of one thing that most people don't see any value in. They don't necessarily like them, not their favorite vegetable. And we just had too many pounds of them all of a sudden in our kitchen. And so you feel like you have to eat them at that point. Because Brussels sprouts may not be your favorite when they're hot and good and right up. They're really not as good after they've been in the refrigerator for a couple of days, generally. They don't keep real well. So we ended up eating, I was peeing greed for like a month. I mean, we ate so many Brussels sprouts that night because we felt like we had to. And to me, that's kind of the mentality you get into with the hoarding of things, is that just because something sounds like it's good, it doesn't mean you need 3 pounds of the same thing to enjoy them.
Here's the story. If any of you have watched the Rose Parade, many of the floats in the Rose Parade are decorated with big, giant stalks of Brussels sprouts, 2, 3, 4 feet high. And my niece, at the time, very young, a young girl, loved to watch the Rose Parade and the floats being pulled by the new cars and trucks and so forth. And we would get Brussels sprouts, fresh ones, and we'd find some would disappear. Well, we thought maybe the dog had taken them or something like that. My niece's room started to smell, and looked in there, and here we found little bowls of Brussels sprouts under the bed and in the closet. And it was because she was saving them because someday she wanted to build a float for the Rose Parade and decorate it with Brussels sprouts. And so when you drive, you go, my goodness, that's a perfect example of that.
You get a room of 20 people, you're going to have a Brussels sprout herd story. I knew that when they put that photo in there. Everybody's got a Brussels sprout hoarder story. That's a good story, actually. So, oh, go ahead.
I'm thinking of the Kalakala story that we've all done and heard about. I personally remember riding the boat a number of times, and I always thought it would be a great thing to keep and collect. Of course, I don't have any resources to do anything with it, nor do I know what to do with it. Now we've seen the demise of that Kalakala. I feel kind of lost, having knowing the boat's gone.
It's gonna be back.
In the form of a car.
Oh, yeah.
I saw that.
But I've told people, I mean, first of all, Doug and I both looked at that extensively. And Doug, I don't mean to speak for you, but I looked at it. It was beyond saving. I mean, that's the first thing you have to realize. There was so much stuff that had to be mitigated on it. I still wonder how they're going to mitigate some of those issues. But it was something that would have been a good idea 30 years ago to have somebody think, wow, we can just save this thing. It needed a saver 30 years ago, not in 2000.
Well, they had a saver 30 years ago, they just didn't do anything.
Well, they turned it into a cannery or whatever it was, a fish processing.
I was thinking they ought to let it just rust in place.
It's got too much hazardous waste on it. Basically, the Army Corps of Engineers was on its last straw. It had been really patient about the fact that this industrial waste thing was sitting in the house waterway. They were really patient.
Yes, I
They're
remember.
still worried right at the moment because they haven't got quite all tore up yet. And it may sink before they get it all tore apart.
That'll be interesting. But this is important though, because one of the things that I've told people that have asked me about it is that's why it's important that there are people that are thinking about saving things or collecting things, but mostly in the saving mode in real time. And we're fortunate that generally those people exist out there. And what we're not very good at is listening to them when they say that it should be saved or preserved. When you think of it as just a used car or a used boat or a thing that can be scrapped or it's just a gap gauge like in every garage in every place across the USA, why would you keep a box full of those?
It's just a coupe de ville.
Yeah, it's just a coupe de ville. It's a 4-door. Who wants to keep 4 doors? I mean, you could think of all that. And this is something Grandpa was really good at. I think actually it's the key to his success as both a collector and a saver of seeing things in real time as they were going by and plucking out things to save as they came along. And being that, I keep using Holden Caulfield, that kind of gets old after a while, but that catcher in the rye, the person who's there to save the stuff in real time. And so the clock law is a good example of there should have been a whole bunch more done in 1968 when they decommissioned it. And there should have been a plan for it. There should have been somebody at the ferry system, and there should have been somebody at King County. I mean, there's a whole bunch of woulda, coulda, shouldas. But the problem is that we don't, I'm kind of repeating myself here, but we don't do a very good job of when those people sound the alarm. As a society, we've gotten kind of lazy in being there to back them up. Nobody's got their back. So these days, if a Clackula were to come along and it was being decommissioned, and somebody said we need to raise all this money to make a museum out of it, it would probably mostly fall on some deaf ears. Because it's too soon, or it's too new, or it's just that, God, it was loud, it vibrated. I mean, there'd be all this negative of how it was always late, and it vibrated, and it wasn't a comfortable ride. Why would it's a hunk of junk? Because if you read newspaper accounts at the time, everybody hated the Clackula as a ferry boat. Not everybody, but most people didn't like it. Bainbridge people wanted it to go away so bad, they couldn't get it out of there fast enough when they got rid of it. Because of its vibration, it was cold, it was windy on the inside, it was loud, it had all these issues. And if you're a commuter every day, the last thing you're going to get behind is supporting a museum. And so that's why I encourage all of you, if you're going to become collectors or savers, to be the ones that are looking at things that are happening right now, that maybe you can save or keep in real time. You understand that there might be a use for it someday, or there may be an appreciation of it someday. Just not right now, it's time. And so then you become its patron saint of whatever the thing is. I put my hands a lot. Anyway, I don't know if that's helpful, but
Looks like the firebolt stuff for right now, was that 29 or whatever it is, that firebolt?
the what?
That firebolt that's being auctioned or?
I'm not familiar with what.
It's a shadow, firebolt that they're auctioning off.
I'm not
For the
familiar.
first time we went through, we didn't make minimum bid and.
Quick question. What is your opinion, quick comment. I've seen that the bedpans used as on the gutters, at the bottom of gutters to, collect the water and so forth. And then they take the water out or whatever. But for the important question about collecting items that at some point in time become illegal, i.e. American Indian stuff or stuff from foreign countries, what is your opinion of that, and how do you, or how does one who may end up with, something, deal with that? Some of my friends have some Indian stuff, given it back to the Indian tribe, and the way that the Indian tribe actually treated it was worse than what it would have been sitting on a shelf in someone's home, and it ended up being broken, cracked, or basically disappeared. So what is your opinion on the legal versus illegal collections?
I am so not an expert in that I couldn't even begin to have an opinion about it. I can tell you a couple of things that I had to learn about some things I own that fall into that category. And that is, in general, if it's something that today is illegal, but it was legal when it was made, and you got it through a legal means, you're generally okay to keep it, you just can't sell it. I mean, it's so vague. It protects the buyer, but not the seller. So I got some Chinese ivory that falls into this category from the 1800s and 19th century ivory. And it's fine that I have it, that I acquired it. I just can't turn around and sell it to a dealer. I can't get rid of it. I can't do it. Because the purpose of those laws is to make it have no value. So if I can never sell it, therefore it's worth $0, therefore why would I be motivated to acquire it in the first place, is the thinking. Now all that being said, I did acquire it because I think it's really cool. I think it's beautiful. They're 19th century chops, the stamps, Chinese stamps, and they're hand carved, and they're really neat. Are they worth anything? No, because I can't get rid of them. Any reputable person would not take them from me. That's one thing I've kind of learned with that. The second thing is, it's such a hard one. I don't know if anybody followed the Chinese art that the Tacoma Art Museum ended up with. A guy gave a family's collection of Chinese art to the Tacoma Art Museum. And the Tacoma Art Museum decided that there were like 8 pieces that told the whole story of this entire art collection. They could tell the story of this Asian American art with 8 particular pieces, and that's all their museum needed. So they announced they were going to auction off the 50-some other pieces. Well, it ends up that the family sued. I think they actually really did sue them. I don't even think it was just like they asked. I think they just started a lawsuit. Because when the stuff had been given to the Tacoma Art Museum, it had been promised that they'd keep it in perpetuity, and it was always going to be Tacoma Art Museum stuff. And so they wanted first rights to take it back from the museum. The museum said, wait a minute, we can raise a lot of money if we sell this. Bottom line is I think half of it went to the Seattle Asian Art Museum. The 8 pieces Tacoma kept, and then the rest, the family and Tacoma Art Museum are going to split any money that comes from selling what was left over. And they came to an agreeable thing. So there's things like that. And that's the other thing. Any good museum, and you should know this as you're making your plans for your stuff, if your decision is to give it to a museum or a library or a school or anything like that, the really good, reputable ones will do it with no conditions. They won't let you put conditions on it, and they won't put conditions on it. That's the mark of responsible saving and collecting, because we don't know in 50 years. I mean, Tam got this stuff like 35 years ago. They didn't know they were going to become a Western art museum mostly in 2014 with this big Hob collection coming in. They just didn't know that. And so they were irresponsible by even implying that it was forever that they were going to have it. And so anybody that tells you that, actually, any of your heirs that tell you that too. I mean, anybody who tells you that they're going to keep it forever is their most treasured thing. There's no way to live forever. So just know that. Just let that part go. And it'll make it a lot easier to think about your stuff.
Can a country ask for something back, like France or Greece or whatever, if they say you want to share your stuff and you put little YouTube or little whatever collection on the internet just for other people to look at? If a country says, hey, that belongs in art, can they actually call you and say, hey, this belongs to us, we want it back?
I don't know how it works exactly. Like I said, I'm not an expert in it. I have read about cases like that, though. It's a big problem right now in Egypt. that there's a lot of Egyptology that got kind of lost during all the fighting, but it's showing up in pawn shops in Schenectady. I mean, it's like, you know, something that there was obviously in one of the Egyptian museums from a pharaoh is in Schenectady, New York, because there's a certain soldier that pawned off. And stuff's showing up. And I do know that there are laws, there's ways that has to be repatriated back to where it came from, because it can show exactly who owned it. Another example would be when you talk about Jewish art in Europe pre-World War II. Once you prove that that piece of art was in my grandpa's living room, there is a whole set of laws that kicks in. It's actually really simple. Once that's proven, it's your piece of art again.
Proving it is the hard part.
But proving is the hard part, and they'll argue. I mean, there's a Matisse right now that I've read that's gone on like 26 years with this family. They don't know what to do to get the I think it's in Belgium. It's the Belgian government. They're trying to get this Matisse, and they had witnesses. They're all dead and dying. I mean, they don't know how to prove it. And the museum's saying that, you know, they need a photograph, or they need something. Or they need somebody that actually pilfered the art to swear by it. And from what I've read, what's going to end up happening is that the European Union's going to come in and just say, no, you got to give it back to them. I mean, everybody's kind of getting to the last straw. The Major Point Museum, what this museum was trying to do was make the point that it being stolen, and this is kind of interesting, I ramble a little bit on it, but it being stolen becomes part of its history. And so therefore, us having it in a museum, in a historical context, whether it was pilfered or stolen or not, is part of its own lineage, and it can't be retracted. So meaning if we give it back to the original owner, we can't erase that history that it went through for the last 70 years. So therefore, ergo, it makes more sense to be in our museum because that's where the piece naturally ended up in its life of going through as a Matisse, as a piece of art. It's an interesting, I mean, if anything, you know, it's A for effort. It's an interesting way to talk about it. That you can't take something's history away from it. And that's what the museum is arguing is happening if you give it back to the family it was stolen from. Who knows?
Let's give Eric a big round of applause.
I think
My question is, one of the last things you had was on people's opinions. How do you deal with them?
Deal with opinions?
Yeah, deal with the people with opinions. Because I ran across about 3 people last week while doing my genealogy that had a difference in opinions and it differed what I knew, and I was in the right with it. And I just was wondering how you dealt with them.
Generally, I'd follow those other steps and be able to really quickly say that here's what I think, and here's my plan, and here's why I'm an expert, and just assert yourself, and then just go on with life and not think too much about it. I mean, that's not a real great answer, but that is in general. If you're confident that you know what you're doing for you, and you can easily support that with a quick, here's why I think this, and here's why I'm doing that, then you are the expert. That's part of the fun of collecting and saving stuff is that sometimes you get to talk about dumb crud, and you're the most expert guy in the room, and you know it. And it doesn't have to be anything important. But you know that you know more about it, that widget or whatever it is, than anybody else ever possibly could. Anyway, well thanks everybody, I appreciate it. Have a great day.